Hello, Doctor Who fans, and welcome to this week's for Doctor Who series 2 as we're looking at the third episode. Obviously, had quite a bit going on in this episode. In fact, this episode is actually one of the sequels, which Russell actually, well, funny enough, if you've been watching Doctor Who Unleashed, you would have heard Russell talk about the fact that he's got a couple of sequels planned this year for some stories that he's done, or I think he might be referring to stories that he's done. They're going to be doing sequels for this year, and this is funny enough, one of the stories that he's actually done a sequel for when it comes to past Russell T Davies stories. And that is, of course, referring Midnight. And you'll see what I mean when we get into this review, why it ties in with Midnight in so many, it kind of fits in with the Midnight theme very, very well. The cleverness of this storyline. Without further ado, let's begin, shall we? So we begin pretty much now, of course, we're coming right off when the Doctor and Melinda left Miami for the whole Lux stuff, which, yes, with that Mr. Ring-a-Ding. I feel like every time I say that, he's going to end up singing, oh God, here he comes again.
I'm Mr. Ring-a-Ding, I make your heart bells sing. Please don't make me laugh, just take my autograph.
All right, that's enough of that. Anyway, so we continue on, but yes, they're coming off from that trip and they're now obviously getting into their space outfits because, yes, it is a space, I guess you could say somewhat of a spacey theme story as we see them in a sort of some style of a spacesuit, and they join this crew as they jump off the ship and they finally land. And then, of course, the Doctor does his reading with his machine that he's been using since the last episode. I feel like he's going to be using that machine every episode just to pinpoint how further he is from getting back to the 24th of May, because we know that's the recurring theme, that the Doctor wants to get Belinda back to the 24th of May 2025, and we know that's not going to happen for some time because of obviously things that are being put in place, or at least we believe Mrs. Flood is part of the reason behind it. And yes, there'll be some more stuff about her very shortly as well. Yeah, we get to that point where obviously the Doctor meets the crew. He starts to realize that they're basically investigating that's in the distance in the planet 6767. Now, I thought at first when I read the synopsis that this planet was going to be called 6767. It just didn't make any sense to me why they would name a planet after two numbers. Like, really didn't add up to me at first. I was like, why would they name it like two particular numbers? They don't really make any sense. But then, but of course, if you go deeper into the story, it starts to make more sense when you realize basically have a base where there were people, but people went insane, or at least that's what the crew believed, or at least the crew of the Doctor first thought was the case, that maybe there was a war going on, or there was something that people had this mental insanity going on, that their brains were being manipulated into believing something that isn't real, and things that don't exist. Funny enough, it ties into the plot in some way, because we have this character played by Rose Ellis, who's trying to get home to her daughter. She's just alone. She's the only person alive in that. Now, you start to wonder, why is that the case? Why is she just the only one standing? Like, surely if she's the only one alive, then technically she should know briefly what really went down. She kind of became, at first she didn't really give out too much information, but then they started to notice that there was something moving behind. Again, it gets sinister as the episode progresses, because they keep noticing something behind the back, and then obviously one of the guards went on her back, ends up being killed from whatever was behind her. And then it was from that moment that, of course, when the Doctor was with the leader and her second in command, I guess you could say, they started to look at the footage and say, I don't know what it is, which is a quote that the Doctor remembers, and it just so happens that the last time he heard that, well, which was funny because they even mentioned that at one time the planet that they were on was made out of diamonds, which brings back a memory to the Doctor, because wait a minute, what did this planet used to be called? It used to be called Midnight. And we have a great shot, like a sort of a flashback shot of the 10th Doctor from Midnight when he was scared, and obviously in that scene when it felt like the enemy was possessing Brain and trying to make copy people, which we all thought he was possessed in that episode. I felt that as well when watching Midnight. He did feel very possessed, point by the enemy, when the enemy kept transferring its ability. Yeah, we never really saw what it looked like at the time, and we were all curious, what does this creature even look like? And lo and behold, the Doctor finally realized, pretty much the Doctor hasn't met in some time, and hasn't met since the planet was referred to as Midnight which was which the Doctor used to call a holiday destination until that event that he occurred as the 10th Doctor. Of course, this time, however, do get to see a glimpse of the enemy. We saw a little shot of it. I mean, we saw its head pretty much, or what we resemble as the head of the creature, and he kind of looked like he was like one of those glitch from that 12th Doctor story. Like, it looked like those, it kind of looked like those glitch people that were glitching into the walls or stuff. That's what it kind of felt like. It felt like one of those enemies from that story a little bit because of the way it looked from the head. But then you also have to think, like, this is a completely meant to be someone who doesn't like show themselves public, because they're an enemy that would rather hide behind someone's back than actually make themselves visibly known. And it was obviously the Doctor had to use the water from the tanks in order for it to expose its appearance. So you can see why this enemy will go to lengths to hide themselves if necessary, and that's what they did. Of course, the Doctor again found a way by basically again exposing it, was able to save Rosa Alice's character. I forgot the name of her character. Nevertheless, that he saved. She's now able to reunite with her daughter. But then, of course, the Doctor worries for a minute that one of them had the creature with them before they could escape. Belinda realized that she could hear whispers from the enemy, so she realized it was her. Until the captain basically had a bit of a silly thing and decided to point a gun at her to try and get the enemy off her back. We find out later on that it wasn't on her back the entire time. It was actually on somebody else. If you saw the final bits before the Next Time trailer came, you would realize it was actually behind the other woman that was in that captain team. So it turns out she had the Midnight character all along, and she kept thinking it wasn't her. Yeah, very unfortunate that basically the captain died for nothing, because it turned out it wasn't even on her back to begin. But nevertheless, it was a very powerful moment. And of course, she did shoot Belinda slightly, but the Doctor was able to save her despite moment that we all thought, oh my god, Belinda's died. But no, luckily she's made it out alive, barely, which was good. But luckily she's going to be okay by the time the next episode comes around, which is a good thing. Another part of this story we do need to acknowledge is, of course, the fact was, I guess you could say, was the nurse of the team. And also, but yeah, she basically sent a message to I guess they could say their chief officer, or whoever's like the top charge person. It turns out that person was none other Mrs. Flood. Yeah, Mrs. Flood somehow, some way is in charge of this group, and she basically she mentioned to Mrs. Flood, oh, we saw this person with them, and then she's like, oh, did you see, like, it's almost like Mrs. Flood, Doctor had that device with him the entire time, which I find very interesting, how Mrs. Flood, what that device was, knows that the Doctor has that device and knows like some information about it, even though she hasn't seen it herself, but yet she knows. That's a bit creepy. Like, how the hell did she know that when she never really, she's never once she never properly interacts with the Doctor, or at least maybe back in the Church on Ruby Road, she just said hello and stuff and acts like humanly, but she never really interacts with the Doctor in her current, which I've noticed that she's been trying to avoid the Doctor at all costs, which I find very suspicious. Why you would avoid the Doctor by all costs and not try to interact with him, which you would think you would, considering if you know so much, why don't you interact? Clearly she doesn't want to be involved with it for some reason, or it's almost like she's trying to at all costs, which I still find a bit suspicious by that. Like, why would you avoid somebody that you can easily talk to if you've got the ability to time travel? That's the Mrs. Flood's basic part that we saw, is essentially she was pretty much the I guess you could say, the leader of the actual boss of the group, I guess you could say. But that's not the only thing that's also, or I guess you could say, weird and a bit puzzling. At one point in the story, Doctor and Belinda were talking to these people about Earth and the human race, and you'll notice they don't recognize Earth, they don't recognize human beings, they don't recognize anything. They were surprised by this, because considering these are human beings, you would think they would know what the planet Earth is. They would have come from that planet at one time, but yet all of a sudden they don't remember any planet Earth, remember anything. They don't recognize the planet Earth. They don't know who the human race are. They don't. Again, you would think, these people would probably have come from planet Earth at some point in their lives, but yet for some reason they don't remember. And yet, even Belinda being puzzled by this, she even asked the doctor, like, they think the planet Earth doesn't exist. What's happened to it? And even the doctor doesn't have a clue of what's going on. So clearly there's clearly something going on with the planet Earth. The doctor and Belinda are going through these travels, and now they're starting to hear from people from the future that they don't recognize the Earth. That sounds very concerned, especially given would recognize the Earth because these humans were raised on that planet. They don't remember anything of that. You start to wonder, if they weren't raised on Earth, then where were they raised? You see what I mean? Like you would have that history about they don't have any recollection being on that planet, being raised on that planet. They don't recognize born on that planet, and that's weird, isn't it? It's really strange how you would basically be living in the future, and yet you don't know nothing section of your life. That's really troubling to think about especially in a story perspective. It's really very strange why they don't remember anything. I'm sure this is, again, it's obviously clearly a recurring theme to this whole plot that they're trying to tell for the 24th of May, the fact that they're trying to figure out why people don't remember the planet Earth. And I'm starting to think we're going down this path of like theory, or I guess the whole Big Bang thing that used to happen with Matt Smith, where we all thought the Earth was destroyed. I'm starting to think it's like a Big Bang Part 2 because of the way that these people from the future are labeling it like planet Earth doesn't exist, like it got blown up before they born or something, or at least that's how I'm phrasing this. But it's just, it's something along those lines. I feel like it's going to be the plot here for the final 2 episodes, and I don't know why that's the thing, but we'll see why that is. There's clearly a reason to why we, in teasers and especially in putting, at the final moments of the Robot Revolution, why we see a destroyed Eiffel Tower, taxi from London, Statue of Liberty from New York, that are all basically partly destroyed, and then we see like buildings in space being destroyed. Clearly there's obviously a reason as to why that's there in space. Clearly there's been some sort of an explosion. I'm starting to think it all makes sense now, doesn't it? It all makes sense why not remember Earth, because it got blew up before that's clearly that I'm starting to believe they left Earth as soon as the Earth got exploded. Either way, I'm starting to think that's basically how I'm looking at this, but I'm sure we're going to learn something. And then we come to the next time, Trevor, and this is where it gets even more interesting, because next time trailer looks like it's set on present day Earth, because you got the whole Ruby Sun. Obviously, she has love interests that we've been seeing, and they mentioned in the synopsis his name is Corner, who is some kind of love interest that Ruby Sunday is going to have. But it's interesting how the Doctor bumps into Ruby, because if correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't they been saying for the last 3 episodes that the Doctor can't land? Here he is with Ruby Sunday in these next home trailers. It doesn't affect them if they do go and see Ruby Sunday. Like, it's almost like Mrs. Font allows go and see Ruby Sunday, even though like that's the part that I'm still like pieced together why that is. Like, why is he allowed to go and see Ruby Sunday, but he's not allowed to go to that Pacific present day Earth? I don't know what that means, but clearly, I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with Unit. I don't know, but it just seemed odd to me how he can go and see Ruby, but he can't go to that point in time. I don't know. There's clearly something weird going on here, because like you can't, because if you're not allowed to be on Earth, you wouldn't be allowed to see Ruby Sunday, right? Point taken. You see what I mean? Like, if you're not allowed to be on Earth, you clearly can't see Ruby Sunday. That's the whole plot here. So there's obviously something happening. The little tease we got of the creature, I guess you could say this enemy that we're going to be meeting called the Sheikahs, or at least that's how they're framing them as. Yeah, they do look very, they're definitely tall. We see from the shadow, they've got like very tall heads or necks or whatever. I don't know. They look they look like they've got slime all over, or at least that's how I think the outside perspective, they do look like they've got a bit of slime coming out of their bodies. That sounds a little, kind of sounds, the looks very similar. I guess you could say similar to Savine a little. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. We'll see next episode. But either way, yeah, they definitely do look. They definitely do look like very strange looking dogs, in my opinion. Especially with the way that they look like on screen. They do look very strange, be like normal dogs. But hey, that is all we basically. I mean, that's all we kind of know. Next story, really. Yeah. But either way, we're gonna see Ruby Sunday, and I'm sure most of us are going to be pleased to see her, as we haven't seen her since the Christmas special when she looked at the star, and she obviously had like a recognition of the Doctor. So clearly, she's been waiting for him for this amount of time. So clearly, it's going to be great to see Ruby Sunday back in the fray. Let me know in the comment section what you made of the well and the whole storyline that they've been doing, and especially the fact they believe that the planet Earth doesn't exist. Do you believe there's a massive explosion planning for the final episode, and that would explain the whole closing of the Robot Revolution, that was a part of that explosion that we're going to see later? Let me know in the comment section, but let me know your thoughts and theories in my next Who Universe. Have a good rest of the week.